So today is the last day of our retreat, winter retreat, and it kind of feels like a good time to end. I find it hard to focus with all these signs of spring springing up everywhere. You just want to get outside and plant some seeds and clean up the house and so on. It's also St. Patrick's Day. So any of you who have Irish ancestors, happy St. Patrick's Day. Lots of celebrations happening right now. Okay, so today I'll talk about verse 7 of the 8 verses of thought transformation. So this says, "In short, I will offer directly and indirectly every benefit and happiness to all beings, my mothers. I will practice in secret, taking upon myself all their harmful actions and sufferings." So this verse is about the practice of tonglen, or taking and giving, which basically means generating compassion for others, wanting them to be free of suffering, and then imagining that we take their suffering away from them and take it onto ourselves so that they can be free of it. And then generating loving kindness for others, wishing them to have happiness, and then imagining giving our happiness, our resources, our good karma, all the good stuff we have to them so that they can be happy. And this is a practice that many people find difficult, which is understandable, especially the taking part. Yeah, it's hard to manage our own suffering, much less taking on more from others. But it is an advanced practice. Yeah, it's normally not something you teach to brand new people, but rather it's a practice that's for people who already have a really good understanding of the basics of Buddhism, like the Four Noble Truths and the suffering nature of our samsaric existence, and then wanting to get out of that, and then on top of that, wanting to help all other beings be free of samsara as well, and that's wanting to follow the Bodhisattva's path. So it's for that kind of person. Someone who has a lot of compassion, a lot of love, altruism, and really wants to become a Buddha to help all living beings. And doing this practice helps to enhance compassion and loving kindness and to decrease self-centeredness, which is one of the biggest obstacles we have on that path. But I've also met people who, even though they're relatively new to Buddhism, they love this practice. They take to it like a duck to water. So I figure they probably have imprints from past lives, and yeah. So yeah, if you do find this practice difficult and challenging, don't be surprised and don't feel bad. It is an advanced practice. On the other hand, you might want to kind of stick your toe in the water and try it out. And there are ways of practicing it that are more maybe accessible, even for beginners. So here in the verse it talks about all sentient beings, which is often the way it's taught traditionally, like right from the beginning you're supposed to take on the suffering of all living beings and give your happiness to all of them. So that's kind of a tall order. But if you start small, like one person, start with one person's suffering, someone that's kind of easy to care about, then it might be a little easier to do. So just for example, a couple of years ago I was living in an apartment, and one of the neighbors had a small baby, really cute baby. The mother would put the baby in a baby carriage and wheel it around the garden right outside my window. So I got a chance to look at this really cute baby. But sometimes the baby would cry. And the crying of a baby, it's not the most pleasant sound in the world. And I'd be sitting at my desk trying to study, trying to prepare for classes, and this crying noise was coming in. But then I thought, wait a minute, why is this baby crying? It must be suffering. Yeah, it's a little like infant, and probably some pain, some discomfort in its body, and it's not able to express itself and say what's going on. All it can do is cry. So it's an expression of pain, of suffering, of unhappiness. And so then I thought of doing this practice of Tonglen. So I would imagine the baby's suffering, whatever it was, coming into me, breathing it in. And when you do this practice of taking on suffering, you imagine it coming to your heart, and there you imagine your self-centered attitude, which is really the problem. Like, I don't want to have to listen to this horrible noise. I'm trying to study and this is bothering me. So it's, it's about me. And so you imagine the suffering coming in and kind of eliminating that self-centered attitude, which is often there, a big part of our life. And then you think of all the good energy that you have, your happiness, your good karma, your resources, your good health. And you imagine that in some beautiful form like light, beautiful white light. And then you send that to the person who's suffering and imagine that it goes into them and fills them up and gives them whatever they need to be comfortable and happy. So I did that practice, just, a little bit. And I mean, the baby kept crying, but my mind was in a better space. Yeah, so it's kind of like magic. It really does transform your mind from being maybe unhappy, negative, annoyed, or indifferent to having love and compassion, which is really a beautiful state of mind, caring about others. And then you kind of, like in that situation, I wasn't bothered anymore by that noise. Yeah. So it's a very helpful antidote, this practice, to those states of mind like annoyance or irritation or fear, if you're feeling uncomfortable with somebody. and then of course it also increases our love and compassion, makes our mind more familiar with those states of mind, which are so beautiful, so positive. So that's one relatively easy way you can start trying out this practice. And I guess one reason people are uncomfortable or fearful of this practice is because they think they really will take on the suffering of the other person or the other beings. But in reality, that doesn't happen, because they say each person is responsible for their own suffering, has created their own suffering through their afflictions and their karma. And it's really not possible for anyone to take that suffering away. Each person has to overcome it on their own. If it was possible, the Buddhas, there's many Buddhas, they would take on all of our suffering. We wouldn't have any more suffering. So obviously that's not the case. So it's not actually possible to remove somebody else's suffering and take it onto yourself. So you don't really have to worry about that. On the other hand, there should be some willingness. if you really want to follow the Bodhisattva's path, you do need to develop that willingness to take on suffering. And there's another way that you can do this practice of Tonglen that maybe a little more accessible. And that is when you yourself are experiencing some kind of problem. So it could be something physical pain or discomfort or sickness, or something emotional, you're unhappy, you're depressed, you're disappointed, something didn't work out the way you wanted. So when you yourself are experiencing a problem, you can use that as an opportunity to do Tonglen practice. And I did this just the other night because I had some tummy troubles, and it was keeping me awake. I couldn't get to sleep, so I was lying there kind of not very happy, not very comfortable. But I thought, okay, I'll do the Tonglen practice. So the way you do it with your own suffering is Normally when we have some kind of problem, we feel, oh, I don't want this, I don't like this. There's this resistance, wanting to push it away, wanting to get rid of it. And that attitude doesn't really help, and it usually just makes things worse. So instead of that, you turn that around and you willingly accept this suffering with the wish that by doing so, all other beings' sufferings will disappear. Yeah, so you just have to say that to yourself. By my experiencing this discomfort, this suffering, whatever it is, may all other beings be free from their suffering. So it's just kind of something you say to yourself. And again, it doesn't mean everyone's suffering is suddenly going to disappear, but it changes your attitude about your suffering. Instead of the resistance, the aversion, or the self-pity, or whatever it is, you're willingly accepting that discomfort, that problem. So your mind changes. Yeah? And so again, it's a really helpful antidote to those states of mind of being unhappy or self-pitying or whatever. And then the suffering seems more bearable, more manageable instead of unbearable. So it does help. Again, it's like an effective, immediate solution to a problem that you're having. And again, it acquaints your mind with compassion and kindness and altruism. So those are things you can do, to start off with and get familiar with this practice. And then as you get more familiar with it, you can start doing it with more people and more problems and so on. And eventually, one day, it will be possible to do it with all sentient beings. And in this verse it mentions, I will practice in secret. So that sounds a little strange. There's a few reasons for that. One was this practice developed in Tibet with Atisha and his followers, and they were called the Kadampa masters. And initially, they didn't teach it publicly. They would only teach it to a few disciples who were mature enough to do it, because they knew it wasn't something that everybody could do. But then later, one of these masters, Geshe Chekawa, found it was such a beneficial practice, he did want to share it more widely. So he wrote a text, and then it became more widespread. And now, lots of people in the world know about it, partly thanks to Pema Chodron, Venerable Pema Chodron. She teaches it, she's written books about it, she's made it really famous. So more people are practicing it. Another reason for secret, the word secret, is that we shouldn't do the practice in a boastful way, like wanting everyone to know we are this great bodhisattva taking on others' suffering and giving away our happiness. That's not helpful. That's about ego and arrogance and so on. So we just do it quietly. And also, it is a practice you can do quietly. You don't need any special costume or special implements or anything like that. So you just do it quietly in your mind. And nobody needs to know. And in fact, I read this one American woman, an article where she talked about doing this practice, and she would do it at meetings at work. And sometimes, the energy in these meetings was not always so positive. People would be kind of annoyed and so she'd just be sitting there taking in the negative energy, sending out positive energy. And it seems that it did have an effect, because one of her colleagues made the comment once that, yeah, when you're at these meetings, they go better. So, so that shows that it can be effective. And again, nobody needs to know what you're doing. You don't have to advertise or boast about it. But yeah, it can be beneficial for others, and of course it's beneficial for ourselves. Okay, so I hope this will help some of you, at least, to start doing this practice, even in small ways. It is really, really beautiful, really powerful, effective.